Good evening and welcome to tonight's edition of Fact Sheet Live on eTV. Here, if it's not a fact, we don't discuss them. Tonight, we are talking security matters. Obviously, that's what the entire nation is talking about. It's the matter of a young man who decides to do advocacy for his area, his community, his locality, who gets killed. Killers are being sought after by the police as we speak. And then after that, the youth in his constituency or in his area decide to protest. In the process of protesting, they bent tires. Around that time, police, military men get to the scene where these youth are protesting. And in the process, per the videos we saw, some individuals were wounded and some were shot dead. This triggered a conversation in the media space, some asking questions as to why live rounds were fired into crowd that were protesting. Some asked questions as to why internal security matters have been left in the hands of the military, when we all know the police have that responsibility to maintain internal security in our country. Some are asking why live bullets were used. Several questions have been asked. Because of this, a committee has been set up. This committee started its work today to investigate how the Ejura shootings or killings, as we call them, happened in the first place. Tonight, we are focusing on the Ejura killings. We are focusing on where some military officers went on a rampage, beat up civilians, slapped some of them, per the account we are hearing, simply because of a car that was washed at Washing Bay and the people demanded payment, and this infuriated the military officers who beat them up. The military high command made a trip to where an apology was rendered. We are being told some investigations are going to be conducted into the matter of the beatings at Wa. But would that suffice? Are the people interested? There have been calls for a bipartisan committee to look into the matter of Wa. There are those who are calling for Shraj to investigate this matter. And several other bodies are also being petitioned to also investigate this matter. Tonight, our focus is on these issues. On the back of that, the NDC embarked on a major demonstration today to drum home the point that there is insecurity in this country and that the culture of silence is back. But is that really the situation? That's our focus tonight on Fact Sheet as we seek to understand the happenings in this country and the very many questions lingering at the back of your minds as you look at the state of our nation when it comes to its security. My name is Samuel Ishen, and we are taking a short break. When we come back, I'll be speaking to my guests to try to understand why and how they feel about these issues in this country. Stay with us. And you're welcome back to the conversation live on eTV, also live on Facebook. Tonight you can join the conversation and share your thoughts, your views and your comments with us by joining us on Facebook and sharing the comments. We also encourage you to also share the link on various groups and platforms that you belong to so others may follow the conversation. So tonight, to help me discuss the issues pertaining to the security of our nation, as those who may describe it as a state of insecurity, those folks are there. Those who may describe it as a culture of silence that's prevailing in our country, those folks are also there. Those who are asking the very many questions are also there. But tonight, we'll try to get a better appreciation of these issues. And to help me do that, Mr. Peter Bismarck, he's the Executive Director for the Institute for Liberty and Policy Innovation. So is Mr. Richard Kumado. We'll be joined on the show as well tonight by Ernesto Yeboah. He would also be joining us, sharing his thoughts with us on the development in the country. So I begin by welcoming my guests into the studio. They are joining me via Zoom. And so let me say good evening to Mr. Kumado. Mr. Kumado, thanks so much for joining me. And then to you, Bismarck, as well. Thanks so much for joining me. My first question to Mr. Richard Kumado, to find out from him his reaction, his comments on the happenings in the country with respect to what happened at Ejura, what happened in Wa, the committee sittings, and also the demonstration just today. Mr. Kumado.
Okay.
I can pose the same question to him. Bismarck, how would you describe the happenings in the country, the issue of Wa, the issue of Ejura, and then the committee sitting today, and then also the demonstration today?
It looks like we have a connection to Mr. Kumado.
We would try and re-establish contact with them and then continue with the conversation. In the meantime, I believe Mr. Kumado is back on the line and we can continue with the conversation. So, Mr. Kumado, if you heard me, I was asking how you would describe the state of affairs of our country when it comes to security.
Oh, definitely. I'm not hearing you. Sorry, I wasn't hearing anything. Bismarck was also not hearing anything. So you guys might want to check the line with Bismarck. He was starting to say there was no sound and he wasn't hearing. But to answer your question directly, there are three levels. And you have insecurity, you have lawlessness, and you have national instability. These are the three levels we look at it. We have some high levels of lawlessness in our streets. And the cause of this lawlessness is coming from the law enforcement officers who are mandated to provide peace and security and safety for the citizens. And their level of lawlessness is creating insecurity within our community. So if you look at for some times now, the 10 people who were killed in Kumasi, coupled with the Techima South, then Ejura, then the various pockets of unconclusive investigative murders that has occurred in this country, is raising the tension where citizens are feeling unsafe and they are feeling uncomfortable even dealing with the police. The recent what we have seen is projecting the military over the police, and instructions are given above the heads of the police. And that is creating a tension between the police and the military. And the operations have not been cohesive, and inconsistency has become the order of the day. In summary, what I am saying is that we have high levels of insecurity within our communities and high levels of lawlessness as a result of indiscipline on the part of the security officers who should be trained or who are supposed to be trained to maintain law and order.
Now, the state of insecurity you describe, at what point can we measure insecurity if we talk about the Ejura, if we talk about Wa, if we talk about Techiman South, of a population of, let's say, 31 million with 16 regions? If we are having cases around, let's say, Ejura, Wa, and then that of, let's say, Techiman South, maybe others, how would that amount to a state of insecurity in the country?
Your safety is guaranteed by how secure you are, and your security is the guaranteeing of being safe. To the extent that large proportion of Ghanaians don't feel safe in their homes, and people are afraid that the military will come after them and shoot them, or people die and there has not been any conclusions into those investigations. If you lost your son and if you lost a daughter or a relative, then you wouldn't be taking in the whole 31 million people into conclusion to say that because there has been 29 million people living, I am safe or my security is guaranteed. Insecurity is when citizens feel a little bit unsafe and they have no trust in the powers that be, particularly the police who have been trained or who are the custodians of maintaining law and order. And when you look at the narration you have given, from Takrady to Wa, to Techima, to Kumasi, to Greater Accra, to Volta region, to Eastern region, and to almost every part of this country, to Nablongo and all those places, they have issues of murder for which answers have not been provided. And you heard the Interior Minister saying that losing one person is too much of a many person dying. That should tell you that every life matters, and we must be doing everything possible within ourselves as law enforcement officers to protect life and property and maintain the safety we have as a core responsibility for which we have been paid as law enforcement officers. So we mustn't have 2 million people dying before we say there has been high levels of insecurity. And these are the triggers, because before you get to national instability, the root causes of many of those triggers are the high levels of insecurity for which you have ignored and sound no alarm that things are being well. And before you say, hey, Jack, it triggered something and the red flags are showing our face. I think we must stop being in a state of denial and wake up to our responsibility and say that our core purpose of being trained is to maintain law and order and to guarantee safety and ensure that properties are not crashed down. And let's perform within that space. Then the people who pay us will be happy with our work. Otherwise, they have every justification to question our abilities and our confidence in the kind of job they have entrusted into our hands.
Now, let me quickly shift to Bismarck and ask the same question. Bismarck, how would you describe the state of affairs of the country when it comes to security presently?
Right. Thank you for having me. I think Mr. Kumar had already given you the levels of measuring the safety of individuals in the country, or what we say statehood. When you have that kind of sovereignty over your territory, as well as giving your citizens the necessary security to ensure their movement highly guaranteed as against any other forms of threats or this kind of basic insecurity of death, armed robbery, and others. So the levels, as you mentioned, lawlessness, stability, and insecurity, you have to look at it from the district level, regional level, and the country at large. So if you look at what we are experiencing in this country, at the domestic or at the district level, we are experiencing a lot of insecurity within our districts, municipalities, and metros. And then at the regional level, when you combine all, then we also have something like lawlessness coupled with that of insecurity. Then at the internal aspect, that is the country at large, we could say there could be instability, because when the first two, insecurity, lawlessness, are not addressed, instability then falls in. When these first two things are not well addressed and the instability falls in, then we are going to have a country of chaos. Then the political instability then comes in, economic, then the race, we can't have social intervention. I mean, development stalls in short. So currently what we're experiencing is high lawlessness, as Mr. Kumar mentioned, and then high insecurity at the district, metro, or we see at the decentralized level. And then at the national level, we have huge lawlessness. Now, measuring these three indicators is quite cumbersome, because there are variables within each of these indicators you have mentioned. And if you look at the insecurity aspects, currently people are not safe when they want to move or travel across one town to the other. Looking at how people are being murdered, like mobile money vendors, people are being traced to their homes and they are murdered. If you look at how teachers are butchered and social activists are all butchered, so that's the insecurity we are experiencing at the decentralized level. Now, when it comes to lawlessness, it's as deepened. It's everywhere, even among those in authority. You see, the laws are there for us to obey, but if we are not going according to what the law says, obviously we are all being lawlessness. If you look at what happened at Ejura, the mode of, ways of sending the military, having the police, addressing the issue, then the shooting came in, all tells you that we experiencing high lawlessness, because there were rules for the regional minister to follow before the deployment of the police. And if you look at the National the Intelligence Security and Intelligence Act 1996, a whole lot of things and procedures need to be followed. So security procedures are key to ensuring your safety. So when these security procedures are violated or abused, obviously you are going to fall within the lawlessness angle. So the lawlessness is not just about individuals not respecting the laws, but authority also not follow due process to ensure your safety. And these two things are currently ongoing in the country. So for instability, I can say we are not yet there, but the two levels of the situation we are facing, lawlessness and insecurity, these are the two things we are currently facing. But when it comes to stability, I think we are a bit far from it. If only we can address the first two, then we can obviously secure and ensure that our safety is highly when it comes to instability. But I can't hear you.
Bismarck, I think they have a problem in the studio. I should guess so.
Yes, because I can hear you clearly. I can't hear them. But can you hear them?
No, I can't.
Oh,
I'm not hearing them.
Okay. All right. So I think that what we'll do is just go for a short breather. When we come back, then we'll continue with the question as to why the military are being engaged when it comes to civilian matters, when per the laws is the police that are supposed to be performing these duties. We'll be right back. All right, so you're welcome back. We sincerely apologize for that technical hitch there. It's technology, sometimes some of these things do happen. But let me go back to you, Bismarck, and ask the question as to why we have suddenly started seeing military officers being engaged in civilian matters. What can be the explanation for this?
Yes, the civilian police to some extent, it looks like most Ghanaians do not to some extent respect the police over the years, looking at some activities they have engaged themselves in, collection of monies on the road, kind of some also do not have the tolerance aspect of, engaging civilians, drivers when they are caught up. And then their rapid response to armed robberies and other petty crimes. So it makes individuals lose that confidence in the police service. So when the military comes, we are told that the military is highly disciplined and they take no nonsense. So over the years, and because we have also seen this coup d'etat and how people were molested between the 1980 to 1990, before democracy, we saw what happened. So the brutality of the military scares people away. They become a bit lawful when they see the military than when they see the police. Because sometimes you see the police itself.
What I find difficult to assimilate is how it is possible that even within the police service there are specialized groups within the police, those who are involved in counterterrorism operations, those who are the formed police unit, the SWAT team, and several other units within the Ghana Police Service trained the same way as that of the military, and yet we can't utilize them.
Yes, no matter, if you look at the weapons used by the police itself compared to that of the military, there's a vast difference. Look at their armored vehicles. Do you see armored vehicles among the police service? So the kind of munitions the military would have is not about the training is key, but the kind of ammunition the police has can't be compared to the military when they come to civilian zones, and they can also convert civilian zones into war zones. So if we want to look at the trainings alone, that is quite not enough. We have to look at the engagement, the tolerance, how we address crime within the country. Because if you have the the SWAT, you have the rapid response team, you have the counter-terrorism, and there's an armed robbery, and they delay 30 or an hour, and the robberies are over before they arrive, and people are dead. You know, so it makes people they do not trust the police service when it comes to rapid response. So it's not a matter of having different units who do not respond. If you have the other units within the Ghana police and they do not respond to crime, or they are not into preventative security, but rather more of investigative, obviously you might not be trusting the system. And there has been instances of injustices, extortions all over. So that is why the military will come in, because when the military comes in, they do not look at the bribery aspect. They're not coming for money. They are come to ensure that they're disciplined. That's the first thing they do. They try to enforce the law, whether in a violent way, in a tolerant way. That's how they are trained for. So they will go for the military to lead, which is wrong, because within the civilian space, you need the civilian police to work. And within even the military, you also have the military police. They also work. So we have just shifted the focus of using the police to maintain law and order as part of their mandate, or as their main mandate. So that's why you are seeing military men are bodyguarding, public officials, which is wrong. We should have the police to do that. But because the trust is not there, we've seen instances where police officers are even robbing these public officials who they've assigned to guard. And there's been others in prison. You can check that. So it takes away the trust within the Ghana police service and that of the military. And then you also understand that because the high infiltration of politicians and the influence they have on the Ghana police service is higher than that of the military. So the trust within the Ghana police service itself is down for the authorities to trust the police service to engage them. That's why they often go for the military. So if you look at the Ejura, for example, though the Ghana police service went, they did not exhaust all the units. Then they went for the military. Because if you bring the other units, they are also come to act like just the first frontiers. So you go for the military who will come in and enforce it, or turning the civilian zone to the war zone and ensure that there is discipline. That's what they will do. So the trust is one, and then the influence on politicians. Then that has to do with the logistics. They do not have the logistics. But that's the biggest challenge. However, I have said over and over that African military and police will not be retooled any moment now, because over the years, when they are well retooled and the weapons are given to them, they cause lots of problems. All the coup d'etat that occurred in Africa is because the military and the police were well tooled. They have the weapons, they have the equipment, and they're able to cause that kind of coup d'etat. And the recommendation given, I'm trying to require the convention, that they should not be given huge weapons. So it is not difficult for government to, provide weapons and logistics for the Ghana police service or the military. But they won't do it because of the convention they have.
Let me ask Mr. Kumado a simple question. From all we have been listening to since this matter broke, we have been hearing people say the military is well trained, they are well disciplined. But in their training, is it simply just about shooting to kill, regardless of the people they are facing, be they civilians or non-civilians?
No, so those who said we should bring the military to lead instead of the police lack understanding of basic security operations and the relationship that must exist between civilians and the law enforcement agencies and the police as the first call of line. If you listen to the committee that has been said and the regional minister, the kind of things he said and the answers he provides, then that should get you worried. And that deepens the lack of understanding between the role of the police in civil matters and the role of the military in civil matters. In security operations, two things are key: instructions, command, and communication. And you could realize that in the case of Ejura, all these three are mixing. What was the briefing before the military was deployed? The regional minister has no idea. Why did he deploy the military? He has no idea. So it's just about politicians taking advantage of the lapses in the system and commanding military officers to move instead of the police. I have worked closely with the counter-terrorism unit of the Ghana Police Service, and we have been everywhere across West Africa. And we set up focal points that gives them intelligence on rare basis, that makes them ensure that the right men are placed at the right places at the right time. doing the right thing. If you look at the confusion we had at Tejuma South and that of Ejura in recent memory, you can understand the naiveness and the lack of understanding of politicians taking charge of security operations when they have no business of doing it. And then again, the orientation of the military is to shoot and kill. And that is why, in the wisdom of those who design security infrastructure, they said, in civil matters, put the police in front.
But
because
Mr.
you realize that in the US, the military...
If I may ask this question. So you say that the orientation of the military is to shoot and kill, but we see these same military officers embark on peacekeeping missions, and sometimes they can go for patrols and no gunshot is heard, though they come into contact with enemy forces. Sometimes they come into contact with civilians and they are able to control themselves. Are these protocols not applicable when it comes to this local scenario we are talking about?
So what I told you is that communication, instruction, command and control. Before they embark on a peacekeeping with the UN, you will have to go to school and be oriented again. When you get to the UN grounds, there's a standardization you need to follow. And you will be held accountable when you go against the rules of the game. And they enforce the laws. So there's command and there's control. What you are seeing, bringing the military into the front line, is that they just brought them. And you never know the instruction regime. And you never know the communication regime. In any case, anytime they say they are keeping peace, one of the ways of keeping peace is to shoot and kill. And so you look at Afghanistan, after 20 years, they have moved out of Afghanistan. And imagine how many of the US soldiers died and how many of the Afghan people died. So anytime you hear peacekeeping, it's not just because they're going to walk there and there'll be peace. They shoot and kill. They face fire and they go for fire. But in those regimes, there are standardizations you have to follow, and the accountability is huge. And once you go against the rules of the game, you are punished. In the case of George Floyd, many blacks have been killed in the US, but it was just one particular person who said that let the rules of the game be applied this time. And he was sentenced to 20 years, 22 years. And when the judge was sentencing him, there were two things he said. He said, one, you have abused the trust they give you as a police officer. And number two, you have abused your authority as a law enforcement officer. Until we begin to hold accountable law enforcement officers, being in the military or the police, they will continue to act with the impunity and the lawless nature you are seeing within our street.
All right, so I asked a question about this and then being brought to order. A committee is being put together. They are investigating the matter. Today, they started their work. Would this bring finality to the matter of the military brutalities and then also the use of, the military and civilian, operations? And then finally, the dangers that await us if we continue the use of the military in civilian operations.
I don't know the mandate of the commission, and I don't know what to be their recommendations. But if you look into our past history, take the Ghana at 50 Commission, and take the Constitution Review Committee, and take the Judgment Death Commission, and take the Almighty Ayawaso West Wagon Commission. It tells me that as a nation, we've not performed creditably well with recommendations of some of these committees. I'm only hoping and praying that government will have the boldness to apply themselves to the recommendations should there be some. Otherwise, then we'll go back to square one and people may not have trust in some of these things. Remember, government is a prerogative. It has a prerogative to set up some of these committees to while away time in order to calm down tensions, and that is one of the tools why they set up some of these committees. From where I stand, I have suggested two things. Let the families engage, the families of the victims engage a lawyer and sue the state or sue the individual officers in charge. Number two, let private prosecutors, being it law enforcement, private law enforcement officers or lawyers, conduct a private investigations into the murders and let them lay the charge against the state and let it go to Supreme Court for pronouncement or adjudication. Then we will come to some level of accountability. And once there's no level of accountability of nobody adheres to the standard laws, the danger is that then civilians begin to arm themselves, then civilians begin to become repulsive, and they will relate based on whatever the military and the police are throwing into the public space. Because public and law enforcement relationship is like love relationship. If the civilians throw in love and they throw in hatred, they will respond. And if the law enforcement officers throw in courtesy and they throw in peace, you will see the civilians responding. That is why everywhere we travel across Europe, when you get lost, the law enforcement officers as your first line of call. And you could see how friendly they are. The UK police do not use weapons, and yet the job is get done. Orientation has become a major issue, and we must go back to the basics.
Discipline, you seem to repose a lot of confidence in the military when it comes to discipline. And so could we not have waited for an internal investigation of the military to conclude its work or finish its work? So they would come up with their report for us to know what transpired either at Wa or either at Ejura. Would that not have sufficed if indeed we have a lot of confidence in the military's structure?
Right. So before I touch on your question, let me add one or two to what Mr. Kumar was saying about the Commission of Inquiry. For me, I think we have to move away from, to some extent, the national commission of some of these committees, you know, because some of these things are done in the districts. This is a district issue, and the district could have worked on that. If you look at Section 7, Section 9 of the Security and Intelligence Act, we see that the district is supposed to provide early warnings. Then the region is also to provide early warnings. But the early warning comes from the district, they give it to the region, the REXIC. So what they have to do is, at least to some extent, we could have dissect setting its own form of public inquiry. Now, if you look at even the Security and Intelligence Act, there's no chief. There's no chief on the council, none at the district level and none also at the REXIC. So when these incidents happen, you saw the chiefs are the first point of call. They are within these communities. If they are part of these councils, DISEC and REXIC, they could have provided the early warning signs, giving it to DISEC, which is that's the MC, the chairman of DISEC. Then relay this information to the regional minister. Then they can then think of what to do next. But after all these things, we are then having public inquiry coming from the national level, right? The thing happen at the district level. So I think to some extent, moving forward, we should constitute something for the district, like it could be a district, commission of inquiry or district public inquiry, so that the district will look into it and then get its finding related to the ministry, that's the regional minister, then to the government. Some of this can work than always getting people from the national level. Then finally on that too, you should understand that the committee is just to justify whether the force used is right or to identify the wrongs and then provide some policy options. These are the three things the committee is going to do. Whether there are references or whatever, is going to fall within justification, identification, and then policy options. These are the very things we do all the time. There's no military officer also on the committee. Remember, this is something like a war zone. To some extent, you should have used a retired military officer who could speak the language of the military or the language of what happened there so that we can understand. Because you're having a lawyer, you are having activists and others who had worked in the conflict arena. But then on the have a retired military officer, a retired police officer who could be part of this commission, so they can also speak the language of some of these things for us to understand. Now, back to your question, you know, is that you can't take away that discipline from the military. And the military, as always, the military will always convert a civil zone to a war zone. Now, you are asking for the military to also conduct its own independent investigation into it. That is quite interesting. But remember, the two incidents between Wa and that of Ejura. At Ejura, the military didn't issue any presser. There was no press statement. But then at Wa, there was a press statement. But remember that Wa, there was no death. Nobody was murdered. But in Ejura, lives were lost. So are you telling us that lives lost at Ejura are not important compared to people beaten or rights violated in Wa. So the military also failed in that context because it is your men that shot people in Ejura, and it's your same men that were violating people's rights in Wa. But in these two scenarios, we had people being died at one side than the other. But then you release a press statement to that of Wa as against that of Ejura, which I do not agree with the Ghana Armed Forces. I really disagree with that kind of pressure they gave. But I was expecting that the president could have been addressed both incidents on how they can also take the matter up, because they have their own internal disciplinary committee, they have their own form of court, which they can also adjudicate this. And you are there to ensure that you control the crowd. You are not there to kill. So obviously, apart from the Commission of Inquiry, we should also have the military also conducting its own internal investigations. Besides that, it could also be the time for the military to some extent interdict their own personnel at this time. Because if you look at the Flores issue, the police officers were arrested because they killed. There's a murder. So here, you are not sent there to go and kill because there was nothing like exchange of guns. According to the police presser, there was an exchange of guns. But if you watch the videos and those giving account, nobody shot at the military or at the police. They were only peddling these normal stones and stuff. Saying, this is in any form of route, you surely have to expect these things. So this is where I like where you mentioned that there are units within the Ghana Police Service, which they have to get down with their shields, have their forms of arrangement to contain them, and they use other forms of tear gas rather than to even invite the military to come in. So I think the military should also conduct its own private investigation and then interdict their personnel. So when we look at what the outcome from the military investigation and that of the public inquiry, then we can compare notes and see what went wrong there. There could be some similarities, there could be some differences. Then we can raise concerns and then see how best we can address these things in future.
All right. So, Mr. Commando, let me ask the question. Minister, command a military regiment or unit into an operation?
Let me say that, let me clarify something. When Bismarck said that there needs to be a military officer on the committee they set up is a defective in nature. Okay. The reason Bismarck is saying that is that we swear an oath to defend the Constitution, and once you bring military officers to the committee and they do not see anybody that look like them or that speak their language, they wouldn't open up. And they are not afraid to die, so they will dare the hell. That is why in setting up this committee, what should have come to mind is that what happened at Ejura is a security operations failure and it's a security breach. It's not about legality. And that is why my brother Bismarck has made my day, and I'm going to buy him a champagne when I'm meeting. That when you do that, the committee has failed before you have even started. And when you bring a recommendation that do not conform with the standard procedures on security operations, the military and the police will not mind you. They won't do anything about it. And that is the danger of what we are sitting ourselves into. It's not about legality. Legality goes with policy, and they give it to the training people or the military lawyers to look at it. But what happened there is not even intelligence failure, but it's about unavailable of good men to act right and the unwillingness of the professionals to take the front row. So you have set up a defective committee to assess something far away from Ejura when they have not been to the crime scene. And this is what we are doing to ourselves as a nation. If I had said it, they will say Richard is at them again. But it's Bismarck who have said it, so they should go after Bismarck after I gave him the champagne. Now, Eshon, let me answer your question. This is where we find ourselves. I have been of the opinion, and you have interviewed me several times, and you saw me screaming to say that I disagree when you have politicians mining national security positions. And this whole idea about politicians being the head of security at the district level, at the regional level, within the security structure we have these days is creating a major issue for us. This is a regional minister who deployed military, but he has no clue why he's deploying them, and they have not given him any briefing. And it's happening all over the country. DCE is deploying military to go and shoot people and kill them, and nobody takes them on. Sean, you can ask Bismarck. It is so inappropriate. It is so unprofessional. We swear an oath to defend the Constitution and not to take orders from politicians. And that is where the military has gone wrong, and the beret they wear and the uniform they wear, they are denigrating the uniform, and the respect for them from the point of discipline is coming down. Now, parents are losing hope sending their children to the military because the respect we have for the military is coming down. The lack of respect and discipline is coming down. So, bro, it is so wrong, and we must not allow it.
Let's zoom in today's session where we listen to the Ashanti Regional Minister. He was asked a question about his source and said he could not disclose his source. Then the panel told him that they could interview or speak to the sources in camera. Still, he stood his grounds that that was not going to be possible. If a civilian is able to stand up to the committee members, how much more military officers who were there on the ground, who might have fired or not fired? Is this committee likely to get any job done at all?
I don't know the reason for setting up the committee. I don't know the criteria they use in selecting the people to the committee. These are powerful people in society, and these are huge people with huge responsibilities and international credentials. You see, when you're asking Lionel Messi to play number 2 position, and you put Cristiano Ronaldo in number 5, then your objective is not to win the match, and your objective is not to score goals. So if you want goals to be scored, then you place people in their strength zone. Then you can be happy that the objective will be made. In as much as these are huge personalities with huge credentials, my only fear and my only concern and worry is that it's a defective committee based on what has happened today, and whatever matter has come out will face the same agitations and the backlash like Ayawaso West Wagon. The earlier, the better. You remember the regional minister said that he doesn't know those who shot the gun. And when he said he has no source, there's no source. If there's a source, he would have said it. Because the powers of the committee is huge. There's a high court, an appeal court judge there who is a powerful human being. And there's somebody from the Attorney General's department. And he said he will not disclose his source. Brother, I can tell you on confidence that before you deploy military, you must have had intelligence, assess the intelligence, and weigh the risks against the control. If they claim that the boys want to burn down the market, then as Bismarck, the best solution is to increase the physical security presence around those installations we think has come under fire. And there's the threat against them, but not to go and shoot and kill. They got no clue, and they acted out of indiscretion. There's no circumspection, and there's no security prudence in that whole operation. And they are running helter-skelter, and it's like the contradictions you saw at the Ayawaso West Wagon. Nothing, absolutely nothing has happened today that people should be happy about. The only thing that happened was the confidence of Erasmus of Joy FM, who stood his ground and gave a vivid account of what transpired there. And I think we need to give that journalist an award of a Black Star of the Voter.
Bismarck, I'll ask this from your submissions you have made. Is this committee bound to fail even from today that they started their job?
Yeah, honestly, because if you look at the questions they have been posing, they are not investigating. They are not getting, they don't know what kind of questions to ask to get to the bottom of the entire issue. For example, if you look at the regional minister, I mean, you watched a video on the internet, or a video had been forwarded to you through WhatsApp. You don't know the source, whether it is true or whether it is false, you just don't know. And the video, he saw how to do with the police water cannon being chased out. And then he's asking, we have to, commend the police officer, the police officer in the car, the driver. So he did not have, there was nothing like intelligence collected at that point. And he had no intelligence, had no clue about what was happening in Ejura. Though Ejura is part of the, electoral hotspot when it comes to violence. It's part of the over 5,000 hotspots identified by the Ghana Police Service. But then the regional minister couldn't. Now, if you look at the constitution of the entire commission, I've already made my point that without any retired military officer or any retired police officer on the committee, I mean, we are not going to get anywhere. You should also understand that apart from the account given by the Joy FM journalist Erasmus, they themselves, they are also going to rely on footages from the media outlets. They have not been to the scene. They will go to the scene aftermath. I mean, they will have to be there themselves. But you know, they have already diluted the evidence on the field. So what are you going to collect? Because you had a dissect to give you the early warning signs. And a dissect is supposed to relay every kind of intelligence collected on the field first. And you should also understand that, look, the first time the guy was butchered or was beaten mercilessly or massacred, that was on Friday. Now, he died on Monday. Between Friday and Monday, there was no arrest, of which the police is aware that someone had been butchered and had been sent to the hospital. So there's a huge gap there where the police could have even obtained information from the man when he was alive than when he was dead. So he spoke to the wife and he gave some free information to the wife. But the police never visited the place. So if we are into a serious country where we are more into preventative security, you have to move in because it is your right to protect lives. And then when you move in to get the first-hand information from the person who had been butchered on the hospital bed, then you can follow up and make arrests. But arrests had been made after the person was dead. So look at the huge gap of even collection of intelligence at one point. So what account with the police service or whoever is going to represent Ghana Police Service on the commission to tell the committee? Now the committee is also not, to some extent, they have their own procedures, they have their own terms of references. But what I want to say is that so far as the committee itself, to some extent, had not been or didn't even know they would be called to participate in this. But they have been called to participate in this by watching footages and think they have the experience in some of these things, so they should be sitting there to ask questions. It's also equally wrong. So that's why I'm saying that if the committee would succeed, not be just about the justification or the identification of the wrong and providing policy options, but rather getting the right people on the commission who could speak to the language that these individuals could understand. Look, all the committee, they are all civilians. They are all civilians. But remember, this is a security thing. This is about serious security issues that had to go beyond the legality. But here we come with the ethics and the morality of ensuring the protection of properties and lives. And remember that the installations in Ejura are not that huge for this individual to destroy. They are not destroying properties. To some extent, the properties we're destroying, it could be some minor issue. So look at how the police even managed the KNUST demonstrations in 2019. It was so beautiful, where you could see the police personnel being part of the demonstrators, taking pictures with them. And these are all beautiful things to let the people calm down. But then you go back there, you take, no, this is me. So for the commission, I think, already as Mr. Kumar has mentioned, that it's a defective one, and there is a deficit in terms of who should help unearth the right information for the public.
Thank you for your submissions, and also thank Mr. Richard Kumado. Our time is fast spent, and we'll be handing over to Girl Vibes to also bring us a very beautiful conversation tonight on eTV. But I'd like to thank my guest, Mr. Richard Kumado, for making time to speak to me tonight. He's a security expert, and so did Peter Bismarck also join me, Executive Director, also sharing his thoughts with us on the issues we table for discussion, which has to do with the security of our nation. Gentlemen, thank you very much for being a part of our discussion tonight on eTV and also live on Facebook. There will be a repeat broadcast tomorrow on eTV at 10 a.m. Do make a date, and do have a good evening.